Right, to trickle in if they're not already here and waiting for us. I am Evan Marinofsky. That is Carl Corazzini. First, I want to say happy birthday, Carl. You're spending it with us. There's no better way to spend it with us than after a Bruins win doing postgame. So happy birthday to you.
Oh, thank you very much. I think that's the perfect birthday present, a Bruins playoff victory. So, a good way to celebrate.
Can't beat that. And I think the sigh you heard, the collective breath being let out, was Bruins fans around the U.S. and around the world breathing just a sigh of relief after Game 3. Bruins win 4-3. I got a little close at the end there. That got a little scary there at the end with that shorthanded goal. And then obviously the goal that the whistle, I thought the whistle blew before the puck crossed the line. I think they just kind of said that's fine, whatever. But neither here nor there. Bruins end up winning. Much better game for the Bruins, especially in the second period than games 1 and 2. What did you think? Initial gut
I,
reaction.
yeah, I think initial gut reaction is number one, adjustments. Not just the players that went into the lineup. And I think you take a look at Loco and Grizzly, they didn't play a whole heck of a lot. But the adjustments that they made systematically, and I think we had touched on it a little bit the other night, like the idea that the Bruins were going to stretch their wingers every now and again just to relieve pressure from Florida's defense. It is consistently down in on the forecheck, and that resulted in Pasternak's goal and Taylor Hall's goal to start the game. And then I think also they made the adjustment. A lot of their offense and off the rush was initiated off the wall, like moving the puck out of the middle right away to the walls, and then attacking from there, and that was resulted in Foligno's goal at the end. So they made those adjustments, and then I think they coached and played with urgency tonight. And I think you look at obviously the line changes that Montgomery made, and then even within the game itself, trying to create different matchups. Like early in the first, you saw Marchand, Nosek, and Hathaway play together, and then late in the third period, you saw two centermen on the ice for defensive zone draws when they could. You saw Coyle and Nosek on the ice at times too. So I think from a coaching standpoint and then from a playing standpoint, they understood how important Game 3 was, and they played with a ton of urgency tonight.
Yeah, I mean, again, you look at, and it's funny, the Bruins go into this game almost as underdogs. Krejci's out for warmups, and then last second gets put on the scratch list before the game, and you think, oh my God, Bruins are without Bergeron and Krejci. But as you said, what a night from Charlie Coyle, stepping up the way he did. Obviously gets that goal, but his play away from the puck was even better. So important. Pavel Zacha stepping up. Tomasz Nosek stepping up. They had Frederick in the middle a little bit there. Both our guys, Frederick and Foligno, we both kind of, debated who should be out of the lineup. Both had contributions tonight. After, it's funny, we missed last post game, we missed the Frederick getting choked by Lomberg. We missed that whole ordeal, which Frederick talked about earlier on Friday. But as you said, I mean, systematically huge changes, which was huge. I mean, again, like you even said like that stretch pass from Orlov to Pastrnak. You had the stretch pass to Hall. How about that awful goal that Lyon let in to start the game? Ooh, tone
Well,
setter.
well, I think that's one thing that we said was an X factor, right? Like the Bruins have such an advantage in net. And Lions let up some difficult goals here early in the series, and scoring first for the Bruins was just like you said, a huge sigh of relief for Bruins fans, and they were able to force the Panthers to chase the game. That's not really the style of game that the Panthers play, right? Like it's get it in deep, it's wear you down. They're not instant offense. So, I don't think it's a coincidence. In each of the games that they've scored first, the Bruins have won. The one thing that I would say about the Bruins early on in that game, you saw that Lyon was struggling, especially with Hall's goal, and then there was a second rebound that he kicked out early into the slot. They didn't put enough pressure on him. They let him get established in that game, and you even saw on a few of Pasternak's one-time opportunities, he moved well, he tracked well east-west, and he was making some big saves. I think had they put a little bit more pressure on him there in the first, you're looking at maybe a 2 or 3 goal lead early in the first period.
Yeah, I mean, again, I just think that, Florida had a chance in this game 3 going in at least that, hey, you've got the Bruins kind of on the ropes. They didn't play well in the first 2 games. You're going home now. So much for that whiteout that the Panthers tried to orchestrate, the free T-shirts on each seat. Nobody wore them. But again, I have a friend who lives in Florida and is a Panthers fan, and he was like, it's really hot down here. People want to wear their jerseys. It's the red looks better anyway. But I'm like, you didn't even do the whiteout. And it was mainly Bruins fans down there. But as you said, I mean, they had a chance there, and the minute that shot goes in, it's it. It felt like it was it in a sense,
Yeah, I mean, you see a goal like that goal and it is deflating for a team, right? Like, and I think Matthew Tkachuk had talked about it before the series started, the idea that we've got to play perfect in order to beat the Boston Bruins. And when it's early in the game with a long stretch pass and it's defended well, right? Like you're forcing someone to shoot outside the tops of the circle with a stick extended that gets a piece of Lyon's glove. Like he needs to make that save. And so what that does to the bench is, okay, like we now really got to play perfect in order to win this game. And that was super deflating for the Panthers and again forced them to play from behind.
Yeah, I mean, and they bring Bobrovsky in at the end, which I don't know how much of a difference that made. The Bruins score, but then he also made that nice save on the halfway breakaway. That's gonna be interesting to see who they start in Game 4, which I that's a tough call because now there's a whole new series, and I mean, what would you do?
Yeah, so that seemed like a calculated decision by Maurice, right? Like, yeah, outside of that first goal that Lyon lets up, like he played really well, right? Like again, like I said, on the Pastrnak opportunities, 3-goal lead going in with 11 minutes left in the third period. That seemed like a decision that Maurice had already made in his head. Like if they had gotten into a situation like that they were going to put Bobrovsky in to see either A, like can they get a boost in that last 11 minutes, which maybe they did, and B, does Bobrovsky play really well in that last 11 minutes to kind of give you the go ahead to put him in Game 4? What would I do? I think it can't go. It can't hurt to go with the $10 million man. Like he was at a point one of the best goalies in the National Hockey League in the world. Can you get the best out of him here for the last 4 games? He has the opportunity to steal games. I personally would put him in.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing to lose. We said this about the Panthers in Game 2. They have nothing to lose in this series. They're not favored. They're the underdogs by a mile. Bobrovsky feels like the move there. You might as well try it. And we said that throughout the series, like that could be a potential X factor. One guy I want to talk about, Charlie McAvoy, set the tone early, gets a hit right off the draw, huge hit, had a team high 8 hits, had a team high time on ice, 24 minutes and 40 seconds. He was a guy that had a really tough game too, really, some bad turnovers, comes into this game and sort of establishes himself as, their number one defenseman. We know he's their number one defenseman, but to have the game he did with Krejci out, Bergeron out, feels like that's kind of a statement game for McAvoy.
Well, I think certainly off the initial face-offs of the game, he sets the tone for the whole team. And I think he shows you why he's one of the best, if not the best, two-way defenseman in the National Hockey League. Like, certainly you come off of Game 2 where, using Montgomery's words, like you have catastrophic turnovers that are leading to goals, and McAvoy chief among them. Like, he just wanted to go out and show his teammates, show himself that he is their guy, right? And I think him and Coyle were the 2 players that elevated their game tonight and gave them an opportunity to win. And if, right, like to get out of this series and to potentially move on, McAvoy has to be the best defenseman on the ice for the Bruins. And tonight was a good start for him.
No doubt about that. So the word out of the locker room right now, Montgomery not sure of Krejci's availability for Game 4. Said that it's 50-50 if Krejci will play in Game 4. Obviously a big loss, but Krejci, was not great in Games 1 and 2. But still, I mean, that's a stabilizing presence down the middle. You hope he kind of finds his rhythm a bit. There really hasn't been a definitive thing of why Krejci, what flared up in warm-ups, what was the deal there. obviously you want him back, but similar to the Bergeron thing, I mean, do you rush him back for this? I mean, I think you want to have him back, but do you necessarily rush him back into the fray? It's a tough call.
Yeah, no, I think you absolutely leave him out of Game 4. You showed tonight with tonight's lineup the sense of urgency, the passion that they played with the depth, with the game that Charlie Coyle gave you. You don't need to rush him or Patrice Bergeron back into the lineup. The last thing you want to do when someone's less than 100% is put them in a vulnerable position. Obviously, right, like Florida is really physical. And once Bergeron and Krejci get back on the ice, they'll be targeted. What you're going to have to hope for is that you get the type of game that you got from Charlie Coyle tonight. Like, I think he shows you a reason why the Bruins have been successful all year. Anytime that you can put him on the ice as a third line center, you win that matchup every night, right? Like, there isn't a third line centerman that can compete with him if he's playing the way that he did tonight. And then, right, like the way he played tonight, he's a top 6 guy on any other team in the National Hockey League. The one thing about him is that he's really inconsistent. When he's at his best, he looks like tonight, both offensively and defensively. And I think you said it best. Like, his best contribution, a great goal being at the net front, but on the PK in the face-off circle, he does so many things that other people aren't capable of doing.
Yeah, and I think it's almost infuriating because, like, where is that all the time? And I think that's one thing that, when he was signed to that contract to 5.25 per a couple of years ago, it was, he's going to be the, when Krejci goes, Coyle's going to move into the top 6 and be a top 6 center. That's never really worked out. I remember there were times last year when Eric Holla was here that it just never really worked. And this is a real chance for him to step up and potentially be that guy. Now, can he be that guy 2 games in a row? He has the tools to do it. Like, Carl, you've been around player development for a really long time. 6'4", good skater, great shot, like all those things of Charlie Coyle, you would look and say, he was a first round pick. Like, that's like, he is the type of guy that you would look at and say, that's a top 6 center. It's just the points aren't there. But again, I think they don't necessarily need him, as you said, to be right now the point producing guy. He's got line mates who can do that. Feels like, again, in going into game 4, relying on him more for the play away from the puck, being good in faceoffs, good on the PK, and just kind of being reliable, right?
Yeah, I think the thing that is infuriating probably for the Bruins fans, right? Like, the ideal that he fits the mold of what a prototypical Boston Bruin might look like, right? Like, that big, strong player that can play at both ends of the rink. And I think what Bruins fans are looking for are someone that's going to drop the mitts every once in a while, someone that's going to finish all their hits. I mean, you look at how strong he is, right? Someone comes across the ice to take a charge at him, and he just puts them down, right? So I think that fans are consistently looking for that, and not every player is built that way. And I don't mean that from the sense of playing physical or anything like that, but like, a consistency is a skill, right? Like it's a mentality and a skill, and you need to be able to work on that day to day. And that's something that Charlie Coyle's had a difficult time of doing for whatever reason. But in this situation where you're going to need to rely on him to get out of this series, I think this is going to be a really good test for him. And I think he's more than capable of carrying that first line. Like, he's such a load to carry below the goal line for any defenseman, especially for the Florida Panthers. Someone that's able to generate offense from below that goal line to get to the net front like he did on that goal. I think, given the opportunity right now, I think that Charlie Coyle is going to have a great rest of this series, if not the whole playoffs.
Well, one thing we mentioned a lot after game 2 was like the puck possession, having the puck down low, trying to move the Panthers out of position in their own zone, because Bruins had no high danger chances in the first. Like, the Bruins were not getting to interior ice very well. You even saw on the Coyle goal, it's just a shot from the perimeter. Like, they were just trying to create havoc in front. But Coyle kind of helps with that puck possession play, cycling the puck. Sometimes he holds on to the puck a little too long, which I think is an issue that's plagued him for a few years now. But, just kind of having that puck possession part of his game, I think helps out a lot. And I think makes a difference in this series with the way Florida is in their own zone. And even with a guy like Zacha, the way that those two kind of offset each other as 1 and 2 centers right now is for sure interesting. Right now, what impressed you most about the Bruins tonight? Like, what was the one thing? I know we just talked about Coyle, and that was pretty impressive. But like, what's the one thing stylistically? A player, like what was the one thing that impressed you the most? Because we touched on some styling stuff at the beginning, I remember.
Yeah, I think second effort was what impressed me the most. I think you look at Charlie Coyle's goal at the net front. If you really go back and look at that, Brad Marchand loses possession of the puck, right, to the Florida defender, and obviously there is no one better in the National Hockey League than getting pucks off the wall and competing on the wall. He goes back, he wins possession of that puck back, he curls up and gets that shot at the net, and then the very next shift, Florida has an opportunity to take the puck to goal, and Thomas Nosek with like an unbelievable second effort back check in order to break that up. And I think you saw that second effort all over the rink. And right, like that's part and parcel, like talking about like urgency in retrievals, both offensively and defensively as well. Like I think they were really urgent, getting to pucks all over the rink, which made, especially in the defensive end, it made their zone exits so much easier tonight. They were crisper. Like when you talk about urgency and retrieval, the faster you can go back to the puck, it gives you so much more time to make decisions and to make plays. And like a lot of what the defensemen are capable of doing in the National Hockey League now is getting to that puck and making those backhand passes to the middle. Like when we grew up, coaches would scream at you to not pass the puck through the middle of the rink. And then I can't imagine what would have happened to us if we tried to make a backhand pass to the middle of the rink. But because Florida is on the Bruins defensemen so fast, right? Like you've got to make those passes, and just the urgency and retrievals for the defensemen allowed for better zone exits. So I think urgency all over the rink and second effort was what was most impressive.
Yeah, and again, the Bruins had some turnovers in the first. That Nosek had a really bad one. Of course, then he dives out and blocks the shot. There were some defensively in the first, but it feels like they cleaned that up, as you kind of mentioned, which helped a ton. You just see, Dmitry Orlov had a much better game tonight. He was creating chances, active in the O zone, good in his own zone, which was something that really was not there in the first two games. Like, they just were cleaner tonight. Like, they were structured. Brick even pointed it out on the broadcast. Like, much more structured, way more disciplined. Didn't let Florida knock them off what their game is. Like, it was just a good, solid performance out of the Bruins tonight, which you can't complain about that.
Yeah, I think what the Bruins did, especially in the second period, was dictate pace of play. Right, and you talk about Orlov in that game, and it looked like, especially in the second period was like your prototypical playoff hockey game. I think more urgency to get pucks on net. I think there was a realization that you have got to get pucks and body in front of Lyon, and then also creating exchanges all over the offensive zone, right? Like, which I don't think Florida necessarily defends really well. So what you do when you exchange in forward and defense, you're just creating a lot of confusion. I think the Panthers had a lot of difficulty there in the second period, right? Like the Bruins outshooting them 2-1 at one point in that game. I think 22-10 or 22-11 at some point. But they dictated the pace of play, much better effort, and if you were looking for a period to hopefully carry over, if the Bruins could play like they did in the second period for the rest of the series, it will be short.
Yes. No, it'll be, and that's what I want to hit on next. There was a lot of doom and gloom after game 2. Lots of doom and gloom, lots of overreactions on Twitter and such. You saw the comment section on our live stream on game 2. The sky was falling quickly, headed back to Florida. Things were not looking so great. I'm not going to make any bold declarations, but I do think that game two, this series is back in the Bruins' hands. This is, I think, some realism set in tonight. The Bruins are the better team. I still have Bruins in 5. I haven't really moved off that prediction. But you look at, Florida now has sort of a controversy in net. You also look at, the Bruins walked in there first game in Florida and just kind of had no issue with them. I mean, it's hard to proclaim this, but like, how do you see the rest of the series playing out?
Yeah, and I don't want to back off the prediction that I made after game 2. I said Bruins in 6. I think there are just too many question marks right now with the Bruins, what it looks like up the middle of the rink. Like the same thing that we said about the Bruins in game 2. Florida didn't play well tonight. Right? Like there wasn't enough pushback in their game after that first goal. Right? Like they didn't really push back until late in the third period. And that was a little bit of the Bruins, like some complacency set in. Obviously, you never want to see a shorthanded goal late in the game, right? Like you have that lead, and essentially you're telling your players to keep it in deep. So I'm going to stick with game 6 for the Bruins. Difficult to replace Krejci and Bergeron. You're not quite sure of the health of Linus Ullmark, although he was, albeit not tested as much, he was good tonight when he needed to be. So I'll say Bruins in 6.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you for sticking to your guns there on that. Ullmark was great. I mean, in the as you said, he was not tested to the levels that he was in past games. They didn't leave him out to dry as much as they did in game 2. Little nerve-wracking, slow to get up in game. I think it was the end of the second period. I forget who it was, but someone kind of came across the net, did like a jumping screen, hit Ullmark, and Ullmark kind of went down. Took a little time to get up. He was a game time decision. So, which is interesting. I know we talked, will they go with Swayman? Clearly, I mean, the fact that Ullmark was able to go a little bit, they were going to go with Ullmark in this game. I assume you're sticking with Ullmark for game 4?
Yeah, I'm sticking with Ullmark. I don't want it to be a situation a couple of years ago with Rask, right? Like where there's certainly an injury there, where you have more than a capable backup in Jeremy Swayman. And I'm not saying that Linus Ullmark's going to be 100%, like no one is at this time of year. But if that injury prevents him from being near his capabilities, I think at some point you go to Swayman, right? Like you've alternated games all year. Players trust playing in front of them. So I go with Ullmark until he proves that he can't do it.
Yeah, that feels like the move there. I think that's 100% where it is. And as you said, I mean, we talked about this after game 2. You're a big believer in sticking with one guy. I think the majority of folks are on that same side of you have a Vezina, most likely Vezina winner here. You play him until he cannot play anymore. And you squeeze as much toothpaste out of the tube as you can with a guy like Ullmark. And I think that that's sort of been the thing. But I mean, for weeks up until the playoffs, a lot of us talked about what's going to derail this team if it's not injuries. And obviously turnovers derailed them in the first 2 games. But there are injuries on this team now. I mean, Krejci out for game 3, 50-50 for game 4. Bergeron likely back for game 5. But I mean, that'll be 4 games he'll have missed. Ullmark's a game time decision. Like, I don't want to get negative here because people are going to get angry at this. So I don't want to get all negative here. But there are some cracks starting to form in this whole thing. And, if Krejci and Bergeron are dealing with these things that aren't just, as you said, everyone's dealing with something right now, but to the point where they're out of the series. And if Ullmark is a game time decision, when you go on and play either Toronto or Tampa, and then if you win that, you're going to go on to Carolina or the Rangers are killing the Devils right now. But I mean, that's a much taller task then if you don't have those. I mean, you can maybe beat the Panthers with Coyle and Zacha down the middle. You're not moving on round after round with those two consistently down the middle as 1 and 2, right?
Oh, no. Like, your next round matchup is against Tampa Bay and or Toronto, right? and to go up against either one of those offensive juggernauts, you need all four of your top centers, right, in order to compete with that. I think, and this is me, I think you are trying to manage the injuries of Bergeron and Krejci right now to make sure that they're completely healthy before they really get back in the lineup, right? I think the one thing that could derail, I'm like, there's clearly something going on with Linus Ullmark, and that's, of the three injuries, that's the one I'm most concerned about right now. Because I always get, at least my sense is that if you get down in this series, you are going to see Patrice Bergeron play at some point. I wonder, right? Because no one's ever really come out and said what's going on with Ullmark right now.
Yeah, the Ullmark thing, as you said, I think is the worst. Because again, if he remember, I mean, you mentioned it there in 2021, they had Rask in that Islanders series who was injured. They trotted him out for Game 6. He clearly wasn't right, and I think Swayman was the backup then too. But much less NHL experience for him. Yeah, much less. He replaced Halak. But again, I think you do have Swayman, but you do want to use Ullmark. And again, if he is continuing to show these potential injuries and whatever he has, that's certainly a bit of an issue. But things looked good on Friday night for the Bruins. And I think, again, the overreactions, everyone can kind of calm down. It's okay. There was a lot of talk on Thursday and Friday of, oh my God, they're going to, the President's Trophy curse is hitting them again. They're going to lose in the first round. They're going to Florida and get stomped on. And that wasn't the case on Friday night at all. So, interesting game.
Yeah, and I think there was a good opportunity really for Coyle, for McAvoy, for Taylor Hall. Like, those are the guys that you're going to need to get a lot of out of the rest of this series. Obviously, in order to win, that's the one person that that's not true. I'm still, and people may think I'm crazy, I want more out of David Pastrnak the rest of the series, right? Like, even tonight, like, I know obviously he's a great goal scorer and one of the best players in the National Hockey League, but still too many turnovers, still trying to make high risk passes. So I'm looking more from him, and obviously he's capable of it. And then Taylor Hall as well. Like, nice for him to get on the goal sheet tonight. But he's a player that can play heavy, that can play skilled, that is really built for the playoffs. And what can you get out of him the rest of the way? And if he's healthy and he's at 100%, like, he really can make a difference the rest of the way.
Pastrnak's an interesting one because Pastrnak has become sort of a lightning rod in the sense that you have one side that says, look at all the goals he scores, and you have another side that says the turnovers are tough. Now, scores a goal tonight, which is great. Had a ton of chances, missed the net a lot. But he had one turnover at the end, towards the end of the game. I think the net was empty, and he went to pass it back. He thought someone was in the middle of the ice, a teammate was in the middle of the ice, he was passing it back, and he just kind of broke it out for the Panthers. Now, again, there were two guys on him, and nothing came of it. It was one of those things where you're kind of watching and going, dude, just put it in the corner. Like, you got 2 minutes left, you're up 2 goals, Panthers are kind of starting to gain some momentum here. Just put it in the corner. I still think they put up his playoff stats. He's averaging over a point per game in his playoff career, which is insane. But what I know you mentioned the turnovers, but what else can he do? Because it feels like sometimes he is, and they even mentioned this in the pregame show, a little bit too perimeter for, what the playoffs are.
Yeah, so I think that's the one thing, right? Like, he hasn't changed his game from the regular season, right? Like, playoff hockey essentially is overtime hockey, just for, a potential 28 games or the 16 wins that you need to win in the playoffs. Like, I think some of the things for him, like, he's someone that plays it with a ton of pace, like, in energy. And I think these last 2-3 games, like, he's catching pucks through the neutral zone, and it's immediately slow the game down, look for the pass. Like, I think what you're looking for him to do is challenge defensemen every once in a while. Can he push the pace on them? Like, he is, one of the 3 best shooters in the National Hockey League, like him, Alexander Ovechkin, and Austin Matthews, right? Like, no one's capable of scoring like he can. So can he push the pace? Can he force defenders to defend for 200 feet, which is difficult? Like what he's allowing defensemen to do is kind of keep their gap when he plays slow. He doesn't put as much pressure on them. They take the ability to take away his shot, which is his most lethal thing. He becomes a passer. So you'd like him to push the pace a little bit more, probably play a little bit below the goal line, not really his thing, and play below the goal line. I'm just saying, like, with some of those high risk passes that he's making, right? Like, do you put that below? Do you live to fight another day? Those type of things. Like, I know that everyone wants everyone to be coached the same, so he's certainly not getting the same feedback that everyone else is on the bench, right? Like when you score 61 goals, I don't think Montgomery's saying what I'm saying right now, which is like, hey, David, do you mind putting that in deep? I don't think that's exactly what they're saying to him. So you certainly will live with some of those turnovers when you're right. Like at this point, he's scored 63 goals through the playoffs thus far. So yeah, I mean, you're at 76 points in 72 games in the playoffs, and you score a ton of goals. It's just, as a fan, that's what I look for. Like, limit the turnovers here in the playoffs, and use your speed and force the Florida Panthers to defend a little bit more.
Yeah, no, I think that's completely fair. I mean, but again, obviously ton of chances tonight, just missed the net on a few of them. Bertuzzi, by the way, Tyler Bertuzzi, had some tough turnovers in game 2, but you see tonight, like I tweeted this out, it feels like he's always finding Pastrnak in the offensive zone. Those two have a clear connection, and it's going to be tough when Krejci and Bergeron, if and when they do come back, it's going to be tough to potentially separate Bertuzzi and Pastrnak. I don't know I forget if we've discussed this, but obviously, Bertuzzi potentially on that third line. But do you take, like, let's say Bergeron and Krejci come back when they're healthy, right? They come back, and obviously they move into 1 and 2 on the depth chart for centers. Do you put Zacha with Krejci and Pastrnak and put Bertuzzi on the third line, or would you keep Bertuzzi with Pastrnak and Krejci potentially?
Yeah, so I think one thing I didn't realize, like, obviously haven't watched a lot of Detroit Red Wings games over the past few years, but the ability for Tyler Bertuzzi to make plays for others, I didn't recognize that he had that ability. I think you take a look at that power play in particular, where it's almost a no-look pass to Pastrnak there, in his spot. He's made a lot of good plays, like certainly the turnovers in game 2, but he's a really good player. I don't think you're probably going to like this answer. You probably go to David Pastrnak and you have some sort of conversation about who he would want to play with. Like, some of it's going to be driven by matchups. Like, it looked like today, especially in Sunrise, that they were trying to match up Bennett, Verhaeghe, and Tkachuk against Pasternak's line. Like, right? Like, it's a line that struggles to defend at times. So I think at the end of the day, it's one of two things. It's either, what do you trust in the matchups a little bit more, and what does David Pastrnak prefer, right? Like,
yeah,
I know people don't want to hear that, but right, like, players, especially your star players, have got to have some sort of input. And my guess is that they would talk to Pastrnak and see what he feels most comfortable with.
And also the other thing is Bertuzzi, Krejci, and Pastrnak were not great together in game 2. So again, I don't know if like that plays into it either. Like, Zacha down the middle. I don't know. I mean, again, it's good problems to have, as we've said. Like, that it's good problems to have that amount of talent in the top 9, and you're able to kind of mix and match what they end up doing with it. I mean, again, they need Krejci and Bergeron back first to be able to even do that over these next couple games.
Yeah, I think if you're asking me to, like, provided they're all healthy, I just look at the opportunity to have a Charlie Coyle, Tyler Bertuzzi, whether it's Taylor Hall or Trent Frederick. Like, you should win that matchup in almost every series, right? Like, I off the top of my head, I really can't think of a third line that would be able to match up with the Bruins in that point. Like,
there isn't one.
So I would I would, if all things considered, right? And I don't know if it's injury or rust for David Krejci. Like if he's the David Krejci that we've been accustomed, just this year, I'm going back to him with Zacha and Pastrnak, and I'm asking anyone to match up with Coyle and Bertuzzi, Hall, and or Frederick.
Well, again, I mean, this. A lot of these playoff series come down to how do you match up your lines, right? Like, you need to have your mismatches down below in the lineup. A lot of teams' first lines just cancel each other out, and it comes down to can your third line, beat their third line, or can your fourth line match up with their first line, freeing up your first line, like all those things. The Bruins have that luxury where they can win a lot of those matchups. And that was one thing I'd mentioned after game 2 was like Bertuzzi with Coyle and Hall. I want to see it at some point. I feel like we have not seen really any of those three together. And I mean, talk about a puck possession line. And again, Hall's a solid passer. Bertuzzi's a terrific passer. Does that free up Coyle to maybe score some more goals? Does that free up Bertuzzi to score some more goals with Hall and vice versa? So, yeah, and also Zacha worked so well with Krejci and Pastrnak for so long, for so much of the regular season. So you also have the check line. Like, you have those options there that you can play with. And I know that people got mad at me for saying this before and saying that it's a trial series and that you can kind of use some certain things, which is, maybe not the best choice of words. But I do think you can sort of still play with some things. Now, you're up a game. I know it's risky. You don't want to do that, but you're working with a lot of talent. Am I crazy to think that?
So there's a lot to work through there, Evan. I would say the margin for error in the National Hockey League is so slim, right? Like,
yes,
all of these players are unbelievable. So to say that you have a test series, that's difficult, right? Like,
well, not a test series, but
yeah.
you can try some things out with your line, like mix and match lines and things like that. Not like, crazy stuff, but just, working with your lines a bit, tinkering with them when needed.
I think the injuries have made that a reality where you're trying to work through some things to see what might work. I think when we looked at the lineups this morning that Fluto put out, and you're like, right, like we were talking early on, like, whoa, that seems like a drastic shakeup. And the more I kind of dug into those lines, it seemed like Montgomery was trying to get away from certain matchups, whatever those might have been, right? Like I think early on it was, I don't even remember the lines, but trying to create a matchup, mismatch somewhere in those four lines, and it looked like he had it early on, right? Like I think he went Lauko, Nosek, and Hathaway as the third line, and then used Hall. It was Hall. Who else? Foligno. They had a matchup with the fourth line playing. Like those are third line guys playing against Lomberg, and that seemed to be the mismatch that he was trying to create.
Was Frederick a part of that?
I think Frederick was a part of that line, right? Like, so in theory, you had, whether it's your second, third line, or really your third line going up against their fourth, there was an opportunity for a mismatch. So injuries have made it a reality that you've got to test some things out here, and you can work through some of those things a little bit now that you're up a game.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think a lot of people scared going into this game. And we even said, like, when we first saw those lines, like, that's a lot of panic for a 1-1 series. I don't know why, you're kind of hitting the panic button on that. But, I think Frederick, that was, before the game, it was like, Marchand, Coyle, and Frederick. And it's like, whoa, that's an interesting threesome that we have never seen play together before, ever. But again, I think they made it they worked it out. They made it work. Nick Foligno, an interesting one. He was a guy that warmed up, kind of precautionary, and then they ended up needing him. Goes in and scores a goal. I thought he was great, not just the goal, but again, down in the cycle game, especially in the O zone, had some good D zone shifts. Like Foligno to me was another guy who, one of those unsung heroes lower in the lineup. I don't know if it's a real mismatch, but did well, and he was a guy that was initially supposed to be scratched.
Yeah, and what Foligno allows you to do, like Foligno, Coyle, Frederick, Nosek, like at times, what they allow you to do is kind of shorten the game in the sense that like they will cycle, they'll possess the puck on the half wall below the goal line. Like you need some of those minutes because Florida is just so heavy on your defensemen, so heavy on the forecheck. You're not going to be able to defend 60 minutes like that. So it makes Foligno and Frederick and players of their ilk really important because they can carry heavy minutes, right? Like they're not a group of players that live in transition, but they're also players that don't turn the puck over, that very responsible, put it in deep, get in on the forecheck, even though they're not fleet of foot. But they can play heavy minutes. They're the style that you need to be able to play with Florida.
One thing I want to hit on is Florida. Obviously we both have the Bruins winning this series. The Bruins are favored. They're up 2-1 now. Great game 3. Anything can happen in game 4. What does Florida need to do to get back in? Like I know goaltending is one, but either stylistically or offensively, defense, like what is it that Florida needs to do in game 4 and beyond to once again make this a much closer series? What's it going to be?
Yeah. So you're going to need Barkov and Ekblad to kind of step up.
Right? The Barkov thing is interesting because he has been not noticeable through 3 games. It feels like.
Yeah. So the only place that he's been noticeable is in the face-off circle, right? Like I think at one point he had won 13 of 16 draws tonight, or 15 of 18 draws. It was some ridiculous stat that he had put out there, but I mean he hasn't created any offense, and Ekblad has been. Have you noticed them?
No, there was that it's funny. There was that play with McAvoy. I think it was the second. And if you watch that, Ekblad's trying to drive the net, but he kind of sticks the elbow out. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say it's a dirty play because the camera work is the camera work. But I mean, it was a weird play, and credit to McAvoy for kind of noticing that and kind of hitting him back, and Ekblad ends up getting the worst of it. Fortunately, Ekblad came back. But you're right. Those two have not really been noticeable, except for like a few little things.
And so, right, like this is a team that won the President's Trophy. They're a huge reason why. Like, obviously, you substitute Huberdeau for Tkachuk, but Ekblad and Barkov carry them at times. And I think in order to compete with the Bruins and to create offensive chances, especially from the back end, Ekblad's going to need to be a little bit more offensive. And I think, right, like if you were to pick a top 10, top 15 player in the world, like that's Barkov. And I just haven't seen that through the course of this series. So I would say that number one, like, right, like it's so cliche, your top players have to be your top players. But if you're competing against the Boston Bruins, you need them to be. And then I think right now, I don't think they were as heavy on the forecheck the last kind of 2 games, like what they did last night, the other night in game 2, and then a little bit of tonight, right? Like trying to take them away the middle of the rink. So hard with one forechecker, kind of a delay with F2. They probably just have to send F2, like force the Bruins to turn the puck all over the rink, allow their defensemen to stand in there, jump down on the wingers, finish all those hits. I think a little bit of what they did in game 1, albeit they lost that game, I think they got to be a little bit heavier on that forecheck. They're not going to be able to play in transition, so you can't ask them to change that stylistically, right? Like that's not their game. Even for Tkachuk, that's really not his game, right? Like 100-point guy, but he's not living in transition. Like he's right, like he's below the tops of the circle, stuff like that. Power play, obviously great player, but yeah, heavier on the forecheck. And then Ekblad and Barkov just have got to produce for him.
And the Bruins dominated the neutral zone tonight. I mean, I think like even they sort of put the Panthers, I think the Panthers were on a little bit of a 1-2-2 there. And, Matt Grzelcyk had a nice pass. Matt Grzelcyk, again, comes in the lineup, had a really nice pass, kind of beat Tkachuk to get it to Coyle. It was just a shot on net, but it was one of those instances where it was like, that's kind of why you want a guy like Grzelcyk in there, to make those plays and to transition the puck the way he did. Didn't get a ton of ice time. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I didn't really see Grzelcyk a ton out there. But again, effective when he was. Jacob Lauko didn't really play much. I think the MO with Lauko is don't play him a lot, but when he is out there, his minutes, he makes them more impactful the less he's out there. Feels like with him, whereas the more he's out there, the more mistakes he makes. Finished a hit on Lyon. I don't know if you saw that. Lauko was trudging down the ice, just right in the Lion, which is like I'm watching him going down the ice and he dumps the puck in and Lion goes to get it and I'm like, he's not stopping. Like he's gonna hit him. Like that's absolutely what's gonna happen with Lauko, which is not surprising at all. So
so I guess that you look at that too. You're talking about Florida being in a 1-2-2 and where the Bruins went to a little bit of a stretch. You're probably gonna have to adjust that neutral zone and what does that mean, right? Like you've got to send someone right again, that F2 right after that defenseman. Don't allow them that time and space to hit someone on that stretch. So that's probably something they'll change in the neutral zone. But I mean, it's just a back and forth. Like these coaches, these players are so good at making adjustments on the bench in between periods. So you'll see adjustments for whatever the next 2 to 4 games.
Yeah. Well, heck of a game 3. Game 4 Sunday at 3:30. We are not budging off our predictions. Carl has changed his to Bruins, he changed his Bruins in 6 after game 2. He's sticking with that. Yep. I am sticking with Bruins in 5 because I made it, and I'm gonna stick with it. But I expect the Panthers to come out hard in game 4. I don't think this is gonna be, the Bruins won game 3. They have the rest of the series. Like I think the Panthers are gonna come out and make game 4 difficult for the Bruins. And especially considering you're definitely without Bergeron, given off what Montgomery said. And I would say you're probably without Krejci. So again, you're also testing your depth once again. So I think it's going to be tough on Sunday. I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk. Not that tonight was, but again, the Bruins controlled play for a while. And for good stretches of time, I think Sunday is going to be a little more difficult. I feel like Florida's not going to leave Florida without some sort of fight.
Well, you're in desperation mode right now as the Panthers. The series not over at 3-1, but there is no chance that Florida can win 3 games in a row, especially having to go to Boston twice, right? So you will see Florida's best effort in the period for sure, if not the first 10 to 15 minutes. And if you can withstand that, and if you can get an early lead, you might be in good shape. But I think Sunday sets up for a 1-goal game that might go into overtime, something like that.
This series could use some overtime. This series could use a little spice to it. That's why I also think Bobrovsky goes game 4, because you kind of want the more reliable guy in net. You don't want that, Alex, the Taylor Hall shot to go in the first 3 minutes the way it did, right? Like you don't want that soft goal in game 4. You want to have everything you can going for you in that game. So should be interesting. Should be quite a game. Again, Bruins win 4-2 over the Panthers in game 3. They lead the series 2-1. It's Carl Corazzini's birthday. Everything is coming up. Everything is just in terrific shape now. It's a completely different mood and vibe after game 2 than it is in game 3 than it was in game 2. But Bruins win. That's today's post-game show. That's Carl. I'm Evan Marinofsky. We'll see you next time after game 4.